Hello. Oh, it would be helpful if I got. I'm the most professional streamer in the world. Hello. I'm gonna be lame, guys. I'm gonna be super lame. I'm gonna eat on stream. I'm the worst person alive. I promise I won't crunch into the mic as much as I can. I'm so sorry. The day completely got away from me. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. Oh, goodness. Goodness. Oh. What the heck's going on even, eh? In the world. What a crazy place we live in. What a nightmare place. I feel frazzled. I feel completely out of sorts. I'm looking good. Cotton doing all right. Good to see you, bud. Looking to Z. Good to see you. Getting the show started. This is going to be the lamest start of any show I've ever done because I forgot to eat. And so I'm just going to have some bread. You guys are going to watch me eat some bread. Had fun watching the new Mortal Kombat 1 trailer. Yeah, isn't that hilarious that they're doing like a reboot? Cuz like the last Mortal Kombat they basically like set Liu Kang up to be like a god, right? Like a time god. He can just do what he wants essentially. And so now they're just like, yeah, Liu Kang makes a new universe cuz he's a god. You know, what else is he going to do with his time? I don't even know why they bother with a story anymore for Mortal Kombat. Like this, it's such a threadbare, like, who gives a crap? It's like nothing. I've always felt that fighting games are rife for choose your own adventure style storytelling. The trouble is that people who are playing fighting games are not really playing the fighting games for the story. Right? You're not really playing Mortal Kombat for the story of Mortal Kombat. But, like, you could have, like, an interwoven, like, if you kill this character, it takes you down a different story thread. You could have, like, multiple different endings for every character. And you would interact with different characters as you made the decisions that you made. Like, if you don't kill a guy, that takes you down a different path. Maybe they become an ally, or maybe they run away and join some other side and you see people you wouldn't see otherwise, right? I've always felt, even from back in like Mortal Kombat 1, I've always been like, that's the way that they could do this to make it like really cool, so that you would do like multiple playthroughs as different characters to see like their multiple different endings. But like oh, wow, Johnny Cage has zero special powers anymore. He's no green energy balls. He's just really talented fighter now. Wow, that makes him like sub Mortal Kombat 1 even. Like, he had the green energy ball in Mortal Kombat 1, right? He had that from way back in the day. So they're making it like real basic. They're going right back to like fighting roots. I love it. Sorry. America is a capitalist nation. If you are against capitalism, you are against America. Yeah. No, death to America, as we say, right? Let's hop into a little bit of news right off the top. Latest Ontario polling from Main Street. Progressive Conservatives polling at 34.7%. Liberals polling at 25%. NDP polling at 24.7%. Greens at 10.7%, and then others 4.9%. This in the wake of the Liberals and the NDP passing legislation to what they're calling a grocery rebate, right? And the grocery rebate, for most people, like at best, is going to be about $200, right? So what they've done is they've decided to give a handout. Take taxpayer dollars. Good to see you, Snake. They're taking taxpayer dollars, the money that you paid in the first place, and they're giving it out to people. And those people are going to take $200. Like, rent is $1,400. Like, average rent is up at $2,000 now. Like, the idea that they're handing out $200 and expecting people to be like, oh, Jiminy Jillikers. Jiminy Jillikers. Jiminy Jillikers and Casimiro. I can't believe it. Oh, my goodness. Let me run out. Oh, God. Right? Mesh, good to see you. I think there's always a reason I go back to your live streams. It's because I'm so beautiful. Mesh, simple as that. It's because I'm a beautiful person, and you know that I'm on your side, which is a rare commodity these days. Mr. Moon Morning All, I'm listening while at work. That's right. Don't listen to me on your free time, guys. Go sit in a field. If you're listening to me on your free time, go sit in a field. Like go play a video game. Go play some Mortal Kombat. Right? Right? Eric, Larry, good to see you guys. Listen to me while you're at work, right? Stick it to the man. Stick it to the man. Pittsburgh Dude 87. What is a progressive conservative? How is that possible? Yeah, it's a fun little bit of branding, isn't it? My absolute favorite moment in conservative history. So after the Mulrooney government basically destroyed the Conservative Party, which is always funny because Mulrooney keeps showing up and saying things, and we're all supposed to go, oh, Brian Mulrooney, the guy that destroyed his party and resigned in disgrace. We should definitely listen to what this guy has to say. Oh, the guy that ushered in NAFTA. Yeah, what a great voice that we should definitely be listening to. And loving the new mic, by the way. It's the same mic. I'm just putting it in my face now. It's just in my face now. I'm gonna get one of those arms. We're gonna make it happen. I just gotta get with the times, you know? I just gotta get with the times. Like, I'm an old man. I'm an old man. The fact that any of this is happening is a miracle, okay? The fact that any of this is happening at all is a miracle. So, after Mulrooney destroys his party, the Conservatives basically go into, like, a 20-year death spiral, right? And this is where Stephen Harper sort of comes up out of. And there's a big split and a fissure that happens. You have the old Conservatives, the Mulrooney Conservatives that still exist. But then a new party shows up called the Reform Party, right? And the Reform Party, like Preston Manning, very prairie-based party, and they essentially take over the movement. They become, like, Preston Manning becomes better known than other conservatives. And so there's a merger that happens between the Conservatives and the Reform Party, right? And what did they call it? They called it the Conservative Reform Alliance, is what they called it, right? The CRA. But it's the Conservative Reform Alliance Party, right? They actually released this. The Conservative Reform Alliance Party. The CRAP. Please, I'm begging every single Canadian. We're competent. We're completely capable. We absolutely should be given the reins of power. Let us control the economy and negotiate what happens in the world. Yeah, we're the Conservative Reform Alliance Party. At Corporate Welfare with Extra Steps, Liberal Edition. Yeah. I've enjoyed this phase of the microphone. It reminds me of when Bernie was on Vermont State TV campaigning for mayor. Oh, there you go. Yeah, good. Maybe I, too, will one day become as prominent a figure as Bernie Sanders. Yeah, this happened, Cotton. This absolutely happened. The Conservative Reform Party came together and they created the Conservative Reform Alliance Party. Yeah, 100%. And so they were just looking for a way to get away from being lame and everybody being like, you guys are psychos, essentially. And so they just grabbed onto this. Yeah, we're not like old conservatives. We're progressive conservatives. Yeah. And to be fair, back in like the 60s, there was a type of conservative which was thought of as a red Tory. And the red Tories were like, not like we think of conservatives today, right? Like the red, like for example, in Manitoba, where I'm from, the conservatives were the people. Oh, well, I've got a Snake. I'd love that, John. I do love this community you've built. That's so lovely, Snake. That's so nice, dude. What a nice thing to say. Thank you so much, bud. I appreciate it. Good opportunity to say, give me money. Give me money! But in seriousness, like, share, subscribe. Patreon is in the description. I'm going to be... I have decided that I'm going to be a little bit more... Because, like, right now I don't really have good reward tiers for my Patreons. Like, if you give me $1, you get into the Discord. But if you give me $5, you basically get nothing, honestly. Like, it's honest. So what I'm going to start doing, and I'm going to send this out on the Patreon blast, is if you give me over $5, I'm gonna start taking a little bit of time out of each stream, and I'm going to read through the list of donators if they want. If they don't want that, then I'm going to not do that. But if you're going to give me $5 or more, then I'm going to take a little bit of time out of every live stream and thank those donators, because I think those I need to be doing something a little bit more special than I am doing. So that's something I'm going to start doing. So please consider donating to the Patreon. If you're donating at $1 or $2, think about donating at $5, and you could get a shout out on the live stream. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the Red Tories. So in Manitoba, the Tory government literally was the one that erected the education system. They tripled the provincial budget, right? Really think about that. Like, a conservative government came in and increased the size of the governmental budget by a factor of 3. They tripled it. But what they did is they erected the education system, right? So literacy went up, people's math awareness went up, all of this kind of stuff. And of course, because they're conservatives, the capitalist indoctrination went up. So it was widely successful, right? So it was this moment in Canadian history where being a conservative didn't actually mean being anti-government spending, anti-social programs, anti-this kind of stuff. It just meant if the government is going to do these things, we want it to be valuable to the society, right? So it wasn't this wholesale full stop no. There was a sense that there is such a thing as a public good, right? And that existed in the Red Tory movement that was basically through the 60s and 70s. And then, of course, you get narcissistic psychopaths like Brian Mulroney, who come in and betray the working class with NAFTA, right? Before I forget, John, I just released a video on my channel talking about weight loss and the COVID journey. Fantastic, bud. Fantastic. Keep up the good work there, bud. Like, it's a long journey. It's a long journey to get any eyeballs on your stuff, honestly. I can see a progressive conservative. I already noticed a progressive neocon thing going on. Like, well, one of the things to think about, like I know I'm pretty fast and loose with the word psycho around here, right? But like, I do think that there is a fair amount of people who are conservatives, who are neocons, who genuinely believe what they say. Like, they actually think the way that they think because they believe it. They're not sitting there being like, we're going to tell these lies and then these people will be suckered into it and then we'll go forward. Like, there's a bit of that. Well, a lot of that, right? But I do also think that there are people in the movement who actually think, like, we're going to go into Iraq and we're going to put a liberal democracy there. And then those people are going to be better off because they don't have a liberal democracy right now. And everybody knows that a liberal democracy is just a better way to organize a society. So we're going to go in there. We're going to help these people out. There's a really great movie, a Brad Pitt movie called War Machine. I highly advise everybody watch because it's fairly... I think that they really do nail the general sense of cluelessness, of hubris, right? Of stupidity, right? That these people tend to have, like high-level generals, high-level officials, high-level politicians, really believing that something is going to happen that is obviously not possible to happen, because Americans in the West generally don't care to know things, and they don't care to know anything about what's going on in the areas that they're investigating. Like, one of the things that I think in that movie War Machine was so interesting is this general is going around, and he goes and talks to the leader of Afghanistan, and he's like seeking permission to do things, and the leader of Afghanistan, who is installed by the United States in the first place, is basically just treating him like, why are you even coming to me and talking to me about this? You're gonna do what you want to do, right? Like, you don't need my blessing or my permission, right? to do this stuff. But it was pretty clear that the guy was like, no, I do need your blessing. Like, I do need your permission, because that's part of this, right? You guys are part of this project of improving your country through the installation of liberal democracy. And I think that there is a lot of, like, the anti-war movement that exists on the right now is sort of a case in point of this, that there's this anti-war movement that's coming around, which is and I mean, Donald Trump in many ways is a repudiation of these wars, and is a repudiation of the war movement that has the neocon war movement. And I think there is a lot of people on the right who are seeing and understanding that this belief that they were going to be able to go into these places and create a paradise, and that we were going to be greeted as liberators. Like, you go back and you listen to all of the George Bush talking points and realize that people really believed that. People really believed that we were going to be greeted as liberators, that the oil reserves were going to pay for the damage, right? Like, and now the evidence is out there. Like, it's too much to bear at this point. Like, you got to really be, like, utterly detached from reality to a point where you're like, the pink sky is coming down with the moon in the alpha omega. Like, you got to be in this kind of like absolute babbling, demented space to believe that what has happened across the world, the actions of the United States, have been successful. Like you got to be somebody like Vosh or Destiny to believe that what we're doing in the United States, in the world, is working, right? So it's interesting that it is the right that is coming to that faster than the left. Well, the liberals, like, the liberals are really the ones that are still pounding the pulpit of we got to keep doing war, right? Like, it's the liberals in the United States that are the ones that are salivating the most for a continued war effort. It's the right that is actually saying, like, the right is still fairly pro-war, but they're just they want prudency in it. So it's not it's like degrees better, but it is as it is. So is climate change going crazy right now? Isn't the ocean on fire or something? If you have an article to show, dude, like, I've been showing articles almost every day now. Like, we just recently went through, like, the hottest temperature. Do I have a climate change article? Like, I don't actually have a climate change article today. If you have a climate change article, feel free to put it in the Discord, and I will show it, because, like, we're breaking heat records. We know that there's extinction events happening on us right now. Like, things are already out of control. Like, I'm not saying this in order to make you guys depressed or anything. I'm not saying this in order to put you in a state of malaise, but just to acknowledge what is true, right? Like, there's this really great artist by the name of Thomas Highway. I studied his play Dry Lips Ought to Move to Kapasanking in university, and he wrote this play about the reserve system. He's a First Nations fellow who wrote about the reserve system in Canada, and it's brutal. It's very brutal. But when he would show this play to white people, they would be like, this is offensive, oh my God. But then he would show it to First Nations people, and they would say, this is what it is. Like, this is what is happening. And so his theory And his idea, his artistic thesis, which I agree with completely, is you have to expose the venom. You have to expose the venom. You can't just let it fester. You can't just let it live underneath the skin. If your objective is to heal the wound, you have to expose the venom. And so here on this channel, that's what I believe in when it comes to the climate change conversation. That we are not going to rectify this issue. Like, and I'm not saying this to be doomerist, right? I'm not saying this to be like, oh my God, we're all doomed. Oh God, oh God, oh God. It's the truth of what is happening. We are going to go over the 2-degree threshold. There is, in fact, the complete possibility of feedback loops. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. I'm doing a new thing here, and I think I'm going to stick with it. Because if I've built the movement that I've got with the mic being out here, this is where I used to have the mic. Right out here. Right? Well, now it's here. Now it's here. And it's easier for me. I can actually speak a little bit softer. So I think I just gotta get one of those arms. That's what I need. Just one of those arms. I need to redo my whole setup, honestly. My setup, guys, if you could see my setup, it's as rigged as it can get. Like, it's really just this rigged kind of like put together sort of thing. And I think that you guys are talking about the anti-war movement on the right, how it's a grift. I think really what it is it's that they're still pro-war. They just understand that these wars are bad. Like, they're not working. Like, they still believe in war. No, I'm not showing the setup radio, thank you. They still believe in war. They still believe in war. They just think that these wars are bad. That these wars are counterintuitive, that these wars are not working, right? And you can see with the popularity of certain figures, like somebody like what's his name? The Kennedy. Robert Kennedy. Is it Robert Kennedy? Oh man, I'm totally blanking. Anyway, RFK, I think, is the moniker. Like, he is explicitly saying, we're going to end these wars and we're going to shut down these bases and we're going to bring our troops home. And he's gaining in popularity. That the corporate state, Mystic, absolute pleasure to see you, bud. The corporate state is interested in really highlighting his sort of anti-vax positions, right? They're really interested in that because they know that highlighting his anti-vax positions means they don't need to talk about his anti-war positions, right? And of course, my position on him with the anti-vax stuff is that we are going to need like a national conversation. Like, and I think that he is the guy to bring that national conversation to the fore. And I'm not against the idea of having a national conversation about the vaccine and about that sort of stuff. And yeah. And I think that's what the military-industrial complex is concerned about with him, is that he is standing in front of people and explicitly saying, we're going to end these wars, we're going to shut down these bases, we're going to bring people home. Like, he's explicitly saying that. And it's making him gain a lot of popularity, I think. And I think a lot of people who are against anti-vax, they're anti-vax, can see past that. They'll look past that and they'll say ending these wars is far more important. And I do think that people are in that kind of space. We've been trying to end these wars for a long time. The populace has been interested in ending these wars for a long time. You think about the protest movement that occurred upon the invasion of Iraq. Like, it was a big protest movement that occurred. And ever since then, there's been a sort of hunger and a sense of ending these wars. And now we've got a Kennedy saying it. So it'll be interesting to see how the CIA assassinates this Kennedy. We'll see how that goes. But Cotton says, no, there will be a feedback loop. I think it's too late. We're at a point where the heat is going to activate itself. It's like how you can start fires slowly with a slow grinding heat, and now we'll just see fires starting climate and weather as a norm. Yep. And I do think that, like, we are seeing interesting Like here in Ontario, we're starting pre-development work for new large-scale nuclear plants. I am 50-50 on nuclear energy. I think that there is an interesting debate to be had about nuclear energy, so I'm not opposed to it. But I'm not like rah-rah nuclear energy. But it seems to be the conservative solution to climate change is just go nuclear. And I don't know, anything at this point counts, right? Anything at this point counts. Too many climate change articles are based on fear. This is from Methane, and complaining about the effects we see, though, not who's causing it at all, or about the real solutions like reducing our harm on the environment. Yep. It's about fear-mongering, right? It's about keeping people scared. Because if you keep people scared, then they'll accept any solution that they're given. Like electric cars, right? Or like carbon capture, right? Keep people scared, they'll accept anything. Mystic says Elon Musk literally destroyed Twitter and he still has simps and stans. What a joke of a world we live in. Yeah. Yeah, dude. Like Elon Musk is a dunder. I've said it over and over on this platform. Like that he really does show you that people worship power. That people worship power. Like he is good because he is powerful, and that is it. And everything he does is good because he has power, and that's all. Kevin says, good to see you, by the way, Kevin. Climate catastrophe will be more like a snowball rolling down a hill than a feedback loop. Once the methane from permafrost gets out, huge greenhouse gas explosion. Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that there's a lot of uncertainty. Like, as much as we as much as we see the general trends, like, and we understand the trajectory of what we're going on, we don't really know what the outcome is going to be. Like, we don't really know. Because it's a larger system than us, right? Like, we don't really understand how it's going to play out and what the effect is going to be. All we know is that it's going to be something pretty dramatic, right? Like, and once the water levels come up, which I think is pretty much a guarantee, that's already happening, right? The water levels are already coming up. So if it's already happening, then we just assume it's going to continue already happening, right? It doesn't take a genius to figure out that the thing that's already happening is going to continue happening. You know, there's still ice all over Antarctica, right? There's still... My hope is that the ice of Antarctica will melt and open up a bunch of ancient cryopods, and an ancient alien species will arise. Huh? Huh? What do you guys think? Huh? What do you guys think? Grinning says, RFK did an interview with Lex Friedman. I've listened to it for about 20 minutes. It's good so far. The thing about RFK is that I feel like he is in a place of reason. That you can disagree with some of the things that he says, but I don't think that you can say that he's crazy. I don't think that you can sit there and say that he's like a lunatic. You know, like he's not like a raving, foaming at the mouth. Like the things that he is saying are based. He has sources. I think that's really what it comes down to. He has sources. Like he's not just speculating. He's not just putting things together, right? Like he's not just saying, oh, we've got this document and therefore that means this over here. Like he's like, no, they admitted it. Here's their confession. Like, we know that this is true because they said so. We even went to court about it and won an injunction and this sort of stuff, right? This is the way that he's talking. I listened to him on Joe Rogan, and I walked away with that sort of feeling of like, this guy is saying some things. I understand why the corporate power structure finds him to be very dangerous, because he's not speculating. He's exposing. Right, he is raising a lot of issues and a lot of questions that I can see why Big Pharma wouldn't want any of this known. I can see why they wouldn't want it talked about. I can see why they would want to keep the populace in this sort of state of like, oh, guys, anybody who says anything bad about vaccines is an anti-vaxxer, and it's just kind of a lunatic who's mistrustful. Just they don't have a degree and all. Well, here comes a guy who has been fighting in courts on these lines, exposing a lot of stuff. And it's telling that the power structure isn't really willing to have an honest conversation about it. it's telling that we can't get somebody to sit down with this guy and actually go through stuff. It's extremely telling that when he sits down and when he talks, the focus isn't on the evidence that he's putting forward and the sources that he's using, but on some offhanded comment that he makes over here in order to try to paint him as an anti-vaxxer. The conversation is as dishonest as it can get right now around this issue. And you guys know me from the very beginning of this whole COVID thing. I was sort of neutral because, as I've always said about this, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of factors, there's a lot of forces, there's a lot of things going on, and I think it's reasonable to be mistrustful of the government and corporate power. I don't think it's an unreasonable position to take. And that finally I came down on the side of the workers. Because, I'm a communist, I believe in the power of workers, and so I listened to the doctors and the nurses. I didn't listen to the lawyers, the politicians, I didn't listen to the corporate power structure, I didn't listen to any of that. I listened to what the doctors and the nurses were saying. And the doctors and the nurses were saying, get this vaccine. And so I trusted in that. But I still believe that this is a conversation that needs to happen. This is a conversation that should happen, and it should happen without the fetters of us all standing around accusing one another of being lunatics, especially as somebody is putting very clear evidence on the table, sources and everything. So it is a conversation that I think needs to happen. If only to save the soul of the nation. We have to find ways to unify again, right? We have to find ways to find these catharsis, to move forward and find a safety. One of the things that I think this society is really bad at is finding a safety in admitting you are wrong, and not having that capitulate your entire being, right? That it should be okay for someone to stand up and say, on this point, I was wrong. And what seems to happen in this society is that if you stand up and say, oh, on this point, I was wrong, then everything you've ever said in the whole world is rejected, which is lunacy. It's absolute lunacy. Of course, something that somebody said is going to be wrong. You're a person. You're a human being, right? It's the entire reason we have peer review. It's the entire reason we have people who look at what you are saying and reviewing it to see if there's any veracity in those statements. It's the entire purpose of the whole system. And we're simply not allowing it to happen, right? Yeah. Never trust nuclear waste to capitalists. They'll dump it in your neighborhood, guaranteed. Nuclear energy is fine. It's fine. You got to do nuclear correctly. You cannot do it on the cheap. Yeah. And if there is a false flag in Ukraine, right, a nuclear power plant meltdown in Ukraine that creates a false flag event, I think it's going to throw a lot of ice water on this. Right? Like Chernobyl did, right? Lex is very calm and calming. I agree. Yeah. I don't really listen to Lex for that very reason. I find that Lex is sort of talking like this the whole time. And he's like, well, what do you think about the thing that is the thing? And, okay, well. It's interesting that somebody like Lex Friedman, I'd like to know how he got started, because he just has really good guests on. It's really interesting. Mystic says, I find it mind-blowing Elon Musk preaches hard work and hustle while the MFer literally dances in a nightclub to Mexico and tweets BS all day. Well, I mean, he's an apartheid baby. That's the thing that's so funny. He preaches hard work and hustle when he was born with $1 billion that his dad earned from emerald mines. Get the F out of here. Content writes, climate change is like being in a fight. You may eventually decide to put your guard up and start blocking the blows, but man, those punches are brought to you by Muhammad and Bruce Lee. Yep. When the water comes up, when the New York subway system is no longer usable, right? When they have to start abandoning large-scale infrastructure, when you have ruins, right? When there are ruins, then the climate change deniers, they'll still exist, of course, because the demented, deluded boomer generation is still going to be like this. But it's really going to be much easier to be like, what are you even talking about, you crazy lunatic? and have the mass support of the public behind you. Like, if a person's going to stand around after the New York subway system is unusable because it's underwater, and somebody says, like, climate change is a Chinese hoax, you're just going to be like, you're a demented lunatic. Like, stop talking. Stop talking. And everybody is going to be like, yep, that's right. Stop talking. Compton says there's a difference between being skeptical of power and letting crackpot Luddites frame the conversation about vaccine hesitancy. Let's not pretend that anti-vax people didn't frame it as some Illuminati mark of the beast conspiracy. Yeah, I mean, I do think that is how the evangelical underclass tends to articulate their skepticism of corporate power, right? That, like, a lot of, like, yeah, Mark of the Beast, a lot of, like, the Book of Revelations, right? All of this kind of stuff is fairly entrenched in the far right kind of ethos. And so when they start talking that way, like, what they are actually saying is we're scared of corporate power, and we're scared of this big power structure, and they're using a like, they believe it's literal, but they are using it is an allegory, right? They are sort of thinking and speaking allegorically. And I mean, what can you expect from these people? Like, what can you expect? They literally only reference one book that they don't read. So what do you expect? Too bad the doctors and nurses are paid by Big Pharma, so they aren't 100% impartial. They need to have a particular official viewpoint when speaking as employees. Yeah, that's sort of a fair... This is kind of what I'm talking about, Methane, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of confusion. Mystic really wants to talk about Elon Musk today, man. Elon Musk crashes cars, explodes rockets, price Twitter right-wingers. Wow, genius, gift to humanity. He's going to save us. Yeah. Dude, I've been saying this for a long, long time. I think I literally said it yesterday. I'll say it to you, Mystic. If you want to see exactly who Elon Musk is, just watch his interview with Joe Rogan. And again, I said this yesterday. Watch the interview with Joe Rogan. I need to watch it again myself just to confirm the veracity. It's been a while since I've seen it, but my takeaway from it really was that Elon Musk is stupid, that he's just cosplaying an intellectual. And all you have to do to realize it is don't get on Joe's side. Because Joe helps Elon a lot, right? Because Joe is going like, whoa, you think? Well, oh my God, I go ahead. What do you think about me? Like, Joe's talking as if Elon Musk is a genius. And Joe is, like, on board with Elon Musk, right? So it's basically like a circle jerk based on the assumption of Elon Musk's intelligence. But as soon as you put a droplet of skepticism and stop listening to Joe, right? Stop listening to Joe as if Joe is like the don't let Joe's voice become your voice in that conversation, and you're going to find out pretty fast that Elon Musk is very stupid. Like, very, very stupid. You just need to listen to him. Like, that's the thing. As soon as you turn off in your brain that this guy is smart or a genius, and you literally just listen to the words that are coming out of his mouth, you realize pretty fast that he's dumb. And the Joe Rogan podcast with Elon Musk, I think, is the place to go to see that. So I highly recommend check that out and recognize pretty fast that he's just using buzzwords, right? He'll just say things like, you know, the Nietzschean expression of the it's like what Peterson does. Just refer to something that everybody assumes is intelligent and good, even if you refer to it incorrectly, and people will just go along with you because they don't know, right? Like the masses of people haven't read Nietzsche, they haven't read Jung, they haven't read Freud. They have no idea what these guys actually said, right? They don't know anything about it. So you can basically say what you like. Right? You can basically say what you like, and as long as you're in this reference period, like people are just gonna be like, wow, he's so smart, instead of saying what is obviously the truth is that, oh, he's just cosplaying as an intelligent person. Like, the saddest, most pathetic thing about Elon Musk is that he's completely fake. Like, he has manufactured his own personality, and he seeks validity in the opinions of other people. It's why he bought Twitter. and he has no self-confidence. He has no self-awareness. He has no sense of self. He literally bought his diploma. So he didn't even graduate from an institution. He bought the right to be called a thing. He's bought all his inventions. He's bought the title to be called a founder. He's bought the title to be called an inventor. He's literally done nothing of merit in his life except be born to a billionaire. And it's pretty obvious that he's actually just sort of like a scared little boy who just wants everybody to like him, right? Which is why he spends like millions and billions of dollars to get on the front covers of stuff, to get onto SNL. Like, why did he go onto SNL? What was that? That's insane, if you ask me, that he wanted to go onto SNL. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's madness. Like, that's a type of like, we're watching a type of madness is what we're watching. We're just watching a little boy who's been given so much money that everything becomes a toy. And in that process, he has not bothered to develop his own sense of self and his own sense of individuality or personhood, right? That he is just an empty vessel that he's constantly trying to fill with other people's adulation and commodities. Like that's who he is. And that emptiness can never be filled. And so I actually think he's a very sad, sort of pathetic sort of person. Like, he's spending all his time on Twitter. What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? If I had $1 billion, do you know what I would be doing with it? I would be walking down the streets of every major city handing out money. It's what I would do all the time. I would get known for it. I wouldn't advertise it, but it would happen so often that people would know that that's what I'm doing. Like, literally walking around the streets of New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Washington, just handing out money to people, walking around the city, just being like, here you go. I'd have a basket of money. And if somebody showed up with a gun or something and was like, give me that basket, I'd be like, here you go. I wouldn't even fight them. I wouldn't even press charges. I'd literally just be like, here you go. I would just be giving my money away wherever I went, because I have so much money that I would probably be making money by doing it. And the fact that that's not what's happening, the fact that Gates and Bezos and Musk and all these guys are not doing that, is all the evidence you need to see that these people are psychos. It's all the evidence you need. That what's the point of having all that money if not to give it away, if not to just hand it to people, and if not to give it to people who at least give it to people who you think are deserving of it, right? But they don't even do that. Everything is about just concentrating their own personal power. So they've lost, if they ever had it, they've lost their humanity entirely, right? Like just give wads of $1,000 bills to people. Like, what's the problem? Oh, they might spend it on drugs. So I don't give a shit at all. Like, I don't care at all. Let them. Oh, I wanted to read this. I will read that, but let's catch up with the chat. That works in academia, but you admit you're wrong in popular public discourse. It's social suicide. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Ligon disease is. I think it's a mistake. I think it's just a bad culture. I mean, you guys know me. Like, this culture is shit. Kevin says, Kennedy said, I do not believe that infectious disease is an enormous threat to human health during a panel in June. I get the skepticism, but that quote is wild. Yeah, but I do think that, like, it's easy to decontextualize a lot of the things that Kennedy says. I think that's the truth. That if you were to actually press him on that quote, you would see that there's a larger point to it, is what I think it is, right? And I see this all the time in all kinds of discourses, that you can lift whatever you like out of whatever text and just say, look at this, right? And pretend as though that's their entire point, right? But then you actually look at it and you go, oh, wait, like he prefaced this with this whole paragraph, and then there was even a preface afterwards, right? And he actually said that in reference to something else, like compared to the nuclear bombardment of Japan, right? I do not believe that infectious disease is an enormous threat to human health, right? Compared to the atmosphere being removed from the planet, I do not believe that infectious disease is an enormous threat to human health, right? Like that's a very common thing that happens in this sort of bad faith discourse that exists in our society, right? Like Fox News does that kind of stuff all the time, where there's a whole lead up and a whole sentence before or a whole sentence after. And that kind of stuff happens to Kennedy all the time, right? Because the power structure doesn't want him to stand in front of people and say, we got to end these wars. Like, that's what this is actually about. Vaccine for coronavirus. There's no vaccine for rhinoviruses for a reason. I'm not saying it had no effect, but it's not like polio vaccine, which makes you immune. Yeah, well, and that's the other thing, is that I think a guy like Kennedy is just pointing out that a lot of the narratives that we were told ended up not being true, right? And that there was a lot of goalpost moving that happened, and a lot of backpedaling, right, that happened. Yeah, most of the Australian population lives on the coast. Nothing to worry about here. Waka walk, 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 walk. Yep. Did you hear about the latest resurgence in malaria in Florida? First time in decades. Gates recently messed with the genetics of some mosquitoes in those parts to make them resistant. Coincidence? Dude, Florida is collapsing. Florida is outright collapsing. Like, we are going to see in Florida that there's going to be a recognition across the world, frankly. Like, America operates with this sort of idea that it can't possibly collapse. That it's not possible for a state to collapse. It's not possible. We are going to see that in Florida. That Florida is going to collapse. That the legislation that DeSantis has put in, this racist legislation, this bigoted legislation, it's going to collapse the Floridian economy, without a doubt. And what I'm speaking about specifically is his banning of illegal immigrants, right? And basically deporting people and chasing them out. Well, those illegal immigrants were doing all of the work that nobody wanted to do, right? No white citizen is going to do that work for the wage that they're paying it. Like, so the whole economy is going to collapse underneath the feet of Florida. And then on top of that, the climate change issue is going to basically remove their coast. So all of the real estate that exists there is just going to be underwater, while simultaneously nobody is willing to actually do any work to solve any of the problems because they're not being paid enough. That the wage they're being paid is not enough to pay the rent. It's crazy. It's crazy. I used to browse Twitter for news without an account. Now he took that away. That's why I'm mad. Yeah, Elon knows how to play his fans in the media. I mean, but it's easy to do so when everyone is so compliant, right? Like, he doesn't really need to play them. Like, he just needs to show up in a Wario costume and everybody goes, ha 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 ha, and claps like a bunch of dumb monkeys. Because they're in the thrall of power. That's what it is. Like, he's not being savvy, right? Like, Elon's not savvy. He's just very powerful. And that's enough. That's enough for a lot of people, right? That people gravitate towards power. People are motivated by three forces and three forces exclusively. Power, vengeance, and love. And Elon is power, right? Like, a figure like Donald Trump is vengeance. And in this culture, it's very difficult to find the figure that revolves around love, because the power structure understands that love is its antithesis, that love is the destruction of power and vengeance, and so you don't actually have that many figures. Somebody like Cornel West might fit that bill, right? And once you realize that somebody is motivated through love, once you get that their primary motivation is love, then they can say some things or hold some positions that you disagree with, but you understand that they're motivated through love. And so you can go along with it. Like, that's how I feel about someone like Jimmy Dore. I don't agree with, especially recently, I don't agree with a lot of things that Jimmy says. But I know that he's coming from a place of love. I know it. And so and so even though I disagree, and I would probably tell him that I disagree, I understand that he's just trying to figure out what's going on, and he's confused too. But he's coming from a good place. He's coming from a place of love. And I think that there's a lot of people who are like that. Yeah, Mystic, Joe Rogan is one of the reasons right-wing media became bigger and influential. He literally platformed every single one of those lunatics. Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because I think that Rogan's defense, quote-unquote defense, and I think it's naive, I think his defense is naive, is good speech beats bad speech. That's what he's always said. That's his central core belief, and I think he believes it. Good speech beats bad speech. It's naive. It doesn't actually work that way. But that is his central core. Like, at least he has an expressed thesis. At least he has a moral idea, right? Even though it's wrong and naive, it's still an idea that he expresses. So I respect that. I tend to think that Joe Rogan is just a reflection of the culture that he is in. That I don't see Joe Rogan as a, like, Machiavellian climbing the ladder. Like, he literally is, like, the fact that he exists is an exaltation. Is exaltation is not the right word. It's a condemnation of the media system entirely. Joe Rogan should not exist. And if he did exist, he shouldn't exist at the level that he does, right? Like the fact that we're turning to shitty comedians, like shitty nightclub comedians, to get our moral positioning, is pretty telling. It's pretty telling that the populace is looking to people like Jon Stewart, Dave Chappelle, Joe Rogan for moral guidance, right? That fact by itself should make you realize that your society has decayed. Not that it is decaying, that it has completely decayed. That it has no moral leaders, it has no moral thinkers, it has no moral speakers, because people are turning to shitty nightclub comedians to get their moral positioning. And a guy like Joe Rogan, I think that he is just a reflection of the society that he lives in. I think he literally is just an actor who hit record on a podcast right at the time when that technology was just new and nobody knew what to do with it. And if it had been somebody else, then that person would be the person, right? The momentum takes you pretty far. And I think that he also really captures an audience. He was like a UFC speaker or a UFC commentator, right? So he already had sort of a built-in base that gravitated towards him. And then he just started having on interesting people, right? And that's his whole shtick, is that he's also spoken to people like Cornel West. He's also spoken to people like Bernie Sanders, right? I wish that he would speak to people like Chris Hedges. I wish that he would speak to people like Richard Wolff, right? Like that those leftist voices seem, but I bet you he's just not aware of them, right? And that's more or less on purpose, because he's more, now that he's in Texas especially, he's surrounded by right wingers, right? And so I don't tend to condemn Joe Rogan on those terms, because I don't see Joe Rogan as the manufacturer of culture. I see Joe Rogan as a result of the culture, and that his position is that he wants to talk to many different voices, and that includes people on the far right, based on this principle that good speech beats bad speech. That the point is to have everybody have a say, and then good speech beats bad speech. But of course that's naive, because Nazis don't care about speech. The only reason a Nazi is talking, like people like Matt Walsh, just like an overt, obvious, he calls himself a theocratic fascist, just a Nazi. The reason why they're talking is to either terrorize or recruit. Those are the only reasons a Nazi talks, is to terrorize or recruit. And so when Matt Walsh goes on his show, he's not going on his show to be proven wrong or to have facts exposed so people can do all that kind of stuff. He doesn't care about that. He doesn't care if somebody shows that he's wrong. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter. What he is doing is going on that show to say, hi, I'm a Nazi. Come on, Nazis. Let's be Nazis together. Here's my website, Nazis, fellow Nazis. Let's all organize as Nazis together, Nazis. That's what he's doing. And no amount of good speech is going to stop that from happening, right? You can't. It doesn't matter if you prove Matt Walsh wrong. It doesn't matter, because that's not the point. The point is to gather forces and recruit and terrorize those that he goes against, which is currently the trans community, soon to be the gay community. I just found that Twitter banned me 3 months ago. I never threatened anyone. I was the anti-capitalist. It was the anti-capitalist tweets. Yeah. Like, it's absolutely true. Like, Twitter is just turning into a reflection of Elon Musk's ego. And so if you're anti-capitalist, well, Elon Musk's going to get rid of you. And you can see this, like, this anti-communist, anti-socialist rhetoric and sort of psychopathy is growing, right? That Donald Trump, for God's sakes, said that if you're a communist or part of a communist party, you won't be allowed in the country. Like, this shit's coming, guys. Like, this shit's coming. It's real. Like, it's not clownish. They're serious. Cotton says, okay, then what exactly does Kennedy want to do about the medical industry? I'm over these people being skeptical. What do they want to do? And no, just keep going back to work and ignoring disease. Yeah. I mean, my thinking would be like we should defund these people, but yeah, Matt Walsh is a sociopath for sure. But I actually don't know what his position is, so I don't actually have it. Yeah, speaking of collapse, what the fuck is with Britain? Yeah, I mean, and France. Like, right now, Britain is less impressive than France. The Brits are actually being quite orderly about it. It's like mainly protest. There are trade unionist protests going on, strikes and all the like. France is on fire. You literally have the police forces of France releasing fascist documents talking about how they're going to put these animals down, right? These pests is the word that they used. That we're going to put these pests down, you know? Like, it's, no, we are witnessing the rise of fascism across Europe. Real black and white, real simple. That these protests and these riots and rebellions and insurrections, or whatever you want to call them, are going to be met with a fascist force. That the leadership in Britain is neoliberal, but at this point, there's no distinction. Like, neoliberal is just rebranded fascism at this point. If you're a neoliberal at this point, you are no different than a fascist. You've just rebranded it so that people will be like, no, he's not a fascist, he's a neoliberal. Those are two different things, even though they're exactly the same, even on paper. If you were to write down what is neoliberalism and then write down what is fascism, you would be like, oh, there's actually parity here. It's actually the same. That the only real difference that exists is that fascism is like, and we should purge the Jews. And neoliberalism is like, no, we should have a Jew day so that the Jews give us all our money. That's the distinction. Yeah, it's not an answer I would accept. The just go back to work. I don't care if small business collapse because we tried to prevent millions of people from needlessly dying. Yeah. Florida is batshit insane. Florida Republicans are more dangerous than the Gators there. Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying is like the state is going to collapse. Right? The state is actually literally going to collapse. Like, people are not going to have money. They're not going to be able to pay the rent. Industry will stop. The water will come up. Like, it will be as though God said this place needs to be expunged from the world. It's going to be like that. Yeah, RFK isn't pushing universal health care. He's pretty squishy on it. Yeah. No, I'm not saying RFK is perfect. Like, I don't actually support RFK. Like, I'm not sitting here saying RFK, rah, rah, let's go. I'm just saying that he's an interesting voice in the conversation and that he doesn't sound like a lunatic. Like, that's as far as I'm willing to go. He doesn't sound like a lunatic. I'm well beyond done taking it on the chin for low rent landlords and small business because they can barely play with the big boys. Yeah. Yep. Tinker, good to see you, bud. RFK Jr. for the free market. Yeah, I think that's right. He's mentioned this in interviews with the right wing. Yeah. But I think that gains him in popularity on the right, if you understand me. That I think there's people on the right and the liberal left, like liberals and conservatives both like RFK for various reasons, right? As a leftist, I'm just like, yeah, I think he would, like, would he actually end these wars? Probably not. I read that Copenhagen basically kicked Blackstone out of real estate. Good for them. No, Blackstone as an institution should not exist. The fact that they exist is a total indictment of the system. Rusty, good to see you. Yeah, Joe Rogan is friends with Alex Jones. Yeah. Well, because they go way, way back. Like, I've seen videos of Alex Jones and, like, because Alex Jones would go to nightclubs and things like this, and they would be stand-up comedians together, right? But, yeah, like, Joe Rogan, like, to me, the end of Alex Jones, what's so funny about that relationship is that Rogan platforms Alex Jones in order to try to get Alex Jones to kind of explain his position, put forward his own defense, basically. Like, I think Joe Rogan wanted to try to help Alex Jones, but you watch the interview, and Alex Jones is just digging a hole. He's just digging a hole, and Joe is doing everything he can to be like, come on, Alex, I'm trying to help you here. I'm trying to help you here. And Alex is just digging the hole and digging the hole and digging the hole. And at the end of it, everybody's just sort of like high and drunk and stupid and just babbling about bullshit. And Alex Jones ends up walking away looking like what he is, which is a fucking lunatic. Good speech beats bad speech when you're susceptible to being convinced by rational arguments. Most people today are influenced by ethic, supremacy, or nationalism. Yeah, not rational. That's right. That's right. Jon Stewart? Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm more or less like Jon Stewart as a person. I think he's still pretty pro-imperialist. That he's been given carte blanche to speak domestically. But he basically toes the imperial line when it comes to foreign politics. I respect his work with the VA and all that kind of stuff, but the idea that people look at Jon Stewart as a moral voice of any sort, and I think Stewart's fairly aware of it. That's what I think is interesting about him as a figure. Is I've seen him say on several occasions that it's not that he thinks his art form has elevated. It's that the news media specifically, the news media has denigrated, and that now they're kind of on parity with one another. When he was saying it, they're on parity with one another. But now news and those corporate entities have denigrated so badly that Jon Stewart is elevated above them, which is sad. Like, Jon Stewart should be a jester. Right? It would be as though we are looking at the jester to ask the jester's advice instead of the priests or the clergy or the pope. Right? Like, that's where we're at as a society. And, like, I can tell when I say, like, priest, clergy, pope, everybody kind of scoffs at that. Why would I ever go listen to any of those guys for advice? Exactly my point. Exactly my point. The whole thing has degraded. It's denigrated. It's fallen apart. Who's our moral voices? And then on top of all of that, if moral voices do stand up, like Malcolm X, like Martin Luther King, what happens to those guys? Right? What happens to them? We know exactly what happens to them. Rush Limbaugh converted to Islam on his deathbed. He's buried with his head towards Mecca. True story. Is that actually true, dude? Radiance96, how you doing, bud? I'm sick and tired of capitalism. When will this system end? Oh, my man, Radiance. I feel your pain, my man. I do. Like, I do. Like, I feel your pain. I, too, would like the system of capital to end. I'm gonna lay out some tough truths for you right now. Okay, Radiance96? The system of capital is not going to end. That the system of capital is a large, massive power structure, a multi-trillion-dollar massive power structure, that it is going to turn to fascism and is already turning to fascism, and beginning the process of expelling from its ranks. I shouldn't say beginning. It has always expelled from its ranks voices that run counter, to create a counter narrative to say we could have a different system. That what we are experiencing now and what we will continue to experience is a system of extraction and abandonment. That the only reason the capitalist system is interacting with you at all is because it has something to extract from you. And the millisecond it can no longer extract anything of value from you, it will abandon you. And I'm not saying this to put you in a state of despair or to spread malaise or any of that kind of stuff, but to make it stark in your mind what is real and what is true, so that you can act accordingly. That we cannot trust these power structures. We should not trust these power structures. They are designed to abandon us. And as the despair spreads throughout the society, the populace will begin to fight back in more and more meaningful ways. Look at France, look at Britain. And the power structure is explicitly telling us what its response is going to be, which is to throw cops at us. And how do we know that's true? Because the power structure is slashing social spending while increasing funding for police. So this is the world that we live in. This is the world that we are marching into. The solution, insofar as there is one, is to organize locally. It's not to come onto a podcast like this. It's not to come into a community like this, although I appreciate that you're here, and I know for myself that this is a big catharsis. That's the reason I do this, is for catharsis and for the catharsis of others. But it's not to just go on the internet and cry in your cups on the internet, even though there's something cathartic about it. The real solution is to knock on the doors of your neighbors, get to know the names of your neighbors, start building mutual aid systems, start asking people what do they need, what help do they need, is there anything we can do to help one another, can we build a tenant organization, can we build a union, can we build some kind of local mutual aid system, can we begin a garden, can we tear up the backyard and start planting crops. These are the ways to rebel against the system effectively. Because the truth is that the system will not end. The system is not going to end. The system is going to become more dystopic. The system is going to become more explicit. The fascism that exists in the society is going to become much more explicit. The example that I've been giving is we are going to see figures in our media like Homelander from The Boys, who right now we are explicitly to understand is a fascist Nazi and is dangerous. But what is going to start to happen is that someone like him is going to show up in our media, and I assume it's going to be a Superman movie, and he's going to be a Nazi, and his ideology is going to be Nazism, and he's going to act that way, and we're all supposed to cheer him like he's a hero. That's what's coming. That's the end of the superhero movement, in my view, is Superman as a Nazi, and and all of us are expected to adulate it, and all of us are expected to go along with it, and that's the end of sort of the proto-fascist superhero genre, and the natural logical conclusion is to end the proto part and just become fascist, and so right now there's sort of an illusionary belief that we are going to be able to vote our way out of it. There's an illusionary belief that the power structure is going to begin acting rationally. There's a delusionary belief that we can negotiate our way, that good speech beats bad speech, and we can negotiate our way out of it. It's naive. It's childish. It's not going to happen. The power structure will never allow anybody to vote them away. They'll do away with the electoral system before that happens. That we are in a massive struggle that supersedes these systems, and we have to begin acting outside of those systems. And the way to do it in seriousness is to organize with the people who are around you locally on these principles, the principles of extraction and abandonment. Be explicit that we are being abused and gaslit by a power structure that benefits from our complacency and complicity. And build systems outside of the system of capital so that you can ease the burden that the capitalist system is putting on us. And that through that process, the only hope we have is to improve this situation for the next generation. So that as the next generation comes into cognizant awareness, as the next generation begins to become aware of itself, and I'm not just speaking of Gen Z, I'm also speaking of the generation behind it, that we will have at least some semblance of systems for them to rely on outside of the system of capital. And that's literally the only hope that we have. Literally, the only hope that we have. That we are in a very spiritual place right now. This is a spiritually dead society. Christianity is dead. Religion is dead in this society. And what that death brings with it is an understanding that we are not just ourselves. We are the process of creation, that we are one iteration of many iterations, that there is another iteration that follows behind us, and that we are not here for ourselves, we are here for the next generation and the generation behind it and the generation behind it. And so our goal at this point needs to explicitly be, and we need to say it out loud, to make things better for the next generation. And the system of capital is not interested in doing that. So we have to do it ourselves. And the only way to do it, literally the only way to do it, is to organize locally with your neighbors and to create understandings that not to get elected into a fraudulent system that is utterly corrupted, but to organize outside of those systems and be explicit that that is what you are doing. That if the system is going to extract from us and abandon us, then we need to abandon it back. And that's what we should be focused on. And the only way to do it is by talking to your neighbors and organizing locally. So, don't expect the system to end. It will not. It will not. Good luck out there, Radiance. I hope you stick around, bud. Demand better. Good to see you. Redistribute BlackRock and Vanguard to end world poverty. Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that. We can do that if we were to seize the halls of power, but that's about it. Egg64 with a $5 donation. Thank you so much. I don't even hate capitalism as much as greed, but the sad part is capitalism is an unavoidable segue to inevitable greed, and by proxy, it has to go. Yep. The good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles. Think about donating to my Patreon. If you donate to my Patreon at the $1 level, you get into the Discord. If you donate at the $5 level, I give you a shout out on the podcast. I'm going to start doing that once I get that organized, because I don't want to just do it, because I worry that there are going to be people who are like, no, please do not shout me out on a communist podcast. Thank you, Egg. I appreciate that. And the issue is that I think you've nailed it, right? Is that human greed exists, right? That they're not 100% incorrect when they say that it's human nature. But the problem is that the system of capital facilitates that, right? That people have these senses of greed inside of them, right? That they have those things inside of them, but the system of capital fuels it. It rewards it, right? Instead of creating a system that works against greed and envy and the deadly sins, instead of that, we have a system that rewards these things. It's brutal. Bread Cultist, good to see you. Grinning Guys with a $2 donation. Thank you, bud. He says, donation train, it's your turn now. Choo-choo. Choo-choo. That's very sweet. Cotton says, what John is talking about, the people building a dual contending power within the current state, an exigency state that do for the people what the high state will not do. Yeah, that's more or less what the truth is. Rush couldn't die from a heart attack because he has no heart. That's hilarious, Tinker. So, like, this vaccine skepticism, look at the class character. It's petite capitalists throwing a fit. Why should any of us stand toe-to-toe with the Reaper so that they can continue to be sunburnt, hot dog-necked sex pests? Seriously. Fuck your local capitalist to ashes. Well, I do think that there is, like, the petite bourgeoisie, right? The business owners, small business, they're still caught in this sort of hope that they are going to be able to join the bourgeoisie. That's sort of the promise, right? Is that the way to be free from capitalism is to become a capitalist. But it's ending. and it has ended. That Walmart, the existence of Walmart should tell you that that's over, right? The existence of Starbucks should tell you that that's over. Like you're never actually going to compete with these people. That you are if you are a small business owner, you are more or less just a worker who happens to have ownership claim, right? You work in the business that you own. I don't like making light of Alex, but Rush was huge. Oh, well. So, I think there's an article here. Oh, well, Matthew Vosher, Death to Capitalism, $1.99 donation. That's very kind of you, bud. I like what's happening here, guys. We got a donation train going on. Woo woo. That's very kind of you guys. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it. I really do. You know, I know for myself that you know, I get into places of despair myself. I get into places of a sense of purposelessness overtakes me as well. That sort of Nietzschean sense of nihilism. Well, Egg 64 again. Thank you, bud. I appreciate that. I appreciate you, Matthew. Thank you. Thank you, guys. And there is sort of this sense of isolation that comes with all of this. Well, thank you, Egg64. I appreciate it. You be well too, my friend. And doing this really reminds me that there are people out there, you know? And I know that you're not all bots, because bots don't give money. Eric says, the thing that I find about the right-wing grifter, they always talk about small business and say that if we get the big government out, that there won't be any big business. I know, right? Like, what a grifting talking point. Like, play one game of Monopoly. Like, the right wing has devolved to such a pathetic degree that their entire thesis can be disproven by a single game of Monopoly. Like, that really is where we're at. Their whole thesis is, oh, if we just get big government out, then everybody will be able to operate freely. Well, okay, no, because then you end up with mergers and acquisitions, right? You end up with mergers and acquisitions until there's only one player left, or a small group of players who agree not to step on each other's toes, until finally everybody's just bought out. There's a fellow that I follow on TikTok who essentially goes through grocery stores to show you how your entire grocery store is basically owned by 6 people, more or less, or 6 companies. Conton says, I'm a bot. I'm a goddamn Terminator. Amazing. Amazing. So, Bread Cultist writes, the Austrian economist's position is that if reality disagrees with their theories, then reality is wrong. Yeah, why don't I have Canadian commie emojis? I just feel like I don't know what I'm doing with any of that. One of the things that pays to remember, guys, is like I work a full-time job outside of doing this, and I'm just one guy, right? I'm just one guy, and I just don't have energy to do a lot of this stuff, honestly. Like, honestly, it's tough. I would like to get some Canadian commie emojis. That's good. Yeah, I am what Charlie Chaplin warned against. So here's a great one from Rainer Shea. The American left supporting Ukrainian Nazis has proven social fascist theory right. Fascism is the bourgeoisie's fighting organization that relies on the active support of social democracy. Social democracy is objectively the moderate wing of fascism. Joseph Stalin. If the Social Democrats were willing to contribute to the anti-imperialist struggle, like libertarians are, we Marxists would gladly join with them in the anti-NATO united front, like we have with the libertarians. But the Social Democrats haven't chosen that righteous path. and neither have most of the other non-Marxist elements of the American left. That includes the Red Libs, who claim to represent Marxist-Leninism, yet have reacted to the recent escalations in the anti-imperialist struggle by denouncing Russia's special operation, attacking the anti-NATO United Front, or both. Good to see you, Kevin. The indications that we would get to a point this bad, where the default stance on the American left is to support the Ukrainian Nazi our government is aiding, became apparent when Sanders began ideologically leading the left towards backing the hybrid against Russia. This betrayal was foreshadowed when Sanders endorsed Clinton, as well as when he sided with pro-imperialist policies throughout the majority of his career. But for me, and many others, it became clear that Sanders was not truly a counter-hegemonic force when he promoted Russiagate. When he decided to participate in the warmongering campaign started by the Clinton campaign, MSNBC, the intelligence agencies, and the other narrative managers of the new Cold War, I could no longer rationalize his proximity to the Democratic Party as a necessary strategic move. I had to recognize that I was wrong to view such a decision as acceptable in the first place, and developed beyond my infantile social democratic ideas. That's how I came to Marxist-Leninism. That, along with my studying how ruling class propaganda misleads us into viewing certain governments as evil. The essential part of my anti-imperialist education was when I learned to notice atrocity propaganda, not just about the socialist countries, but about any given country our government wants us to hate. I became trained to recognize the lies about Russia before I applied the same analytical framework to China or to North Korea. So when the Ukraine conflict escalated last year, I could easily protect myself from the psyops designed to portray the Russian side as a moral equivalent to the Ukrainian side. It was always obvious to properly informed minds that the Bucha massacre, for one example of these kinds of deceptions, was a Ukrainian false flag. There's no comparing Russia's war tactics to those of the Ukrainians. Whereas Russia takes extraordinary care to adhere to the Geneva Conventions in its combat, Ukraine tortures its prisoners and has no regard for civilian lives. To act like there's no right side in this war is to minimize the crimes of a modern fascist state. Ukraine is the one that began an ethnic cleansing campaign against the Russian speakers, and the one whose government has thereby forfeited its right to exist. Russia had an ethical imperative to rescue the communities the fascist coup regime threatened. For that reason, every communist party in the world that hasn't sold out to imperialism is narratively backing Russia in this conflict. The explanation for why an element of the left exists that's pro-Ukraine or that takes the neither NATO nor Russia stance is the theory of social fascism. Social fascism is the idea the Communist Internationalist put forward to make sense of why the reformers on the left had decided to collaborate with the forces of reaction rather than make an alliance with the revolutionaries. Their conclusion, this being that social democracy is the moderate wing of fascism, due to its willingness to betray the revolutionary struggle, has been contested over the decades. With the American and European left's reaction to the Ukraine war, though, it's become more apparent than ever that the Social Democrats and the other left anti-Marxists are ultimately on fascism's side. What other conclusion can we come to upon hearing Sanders say that he essentially supports what Biden is doing in Ukraine, or upon seeing AOC vote to fund the Ukrainian Nazi regime, than to have to be publicly confronted in order to change her stance? AOC's apology following the protests wasn't part of a learning process where she'll now start to gain anti-imperialist principles. It was only a way to placate those raising these concerns. Besides, the damage was done with that vote, which ensured that the Ukraine aid effort would continue throughout the rest of the time Ukraine remains relevant. When the empire shifts towards its next targets, those being Serbia, all of the BRICS countries, and geopolitical swing states like Indonesia and South Africa, AOC and other progressive politicians will assist in the new hybrid warfare efforts. As a consequence of their refusal to challenge the war machine, at worst, a third world war will happen, and at best, Washington's ability to inflict global violence will be prolonged. The crimes the democratic socialists have committed against the anti-imperialist cause are what's taught many developing radicals not to trust any democratic leaders, simply because they call themselves socialists. The next step these radicals must take is to learn that we also can't trust organizations like PSL just because they posit themselves as alternatives to the social fascists. That PSL, FRSO, and CPUSA have disavowed Russia's action in Ukraine shows that they're not truly willing to challenge social fascism. To do so requires building a version of the socialist movement that's serious in its anti-imperialism. To combat U.S. hegemony, we need to narratively assist the global players that are challenging Washington. To praise Russia's active defiance against the hegemon is to impact the conflict in a way which harms the USA, because Russia will need to win the information war in order to win the physical war. To disavow the special operation is to narratively assist NATO, because acting like Russia was in the wrong to intervene provides the pro-NATO side with an argument for continuing the aid effort. These established left organizations have also shown themselves not to be reliable anti-imperialist allies by attacking the United Front against NATO. They've targeted the pro-Russian organizations, not even trying to refute their geopolitical analysis, so much as try to discredit their strategy. Even though organizations like PCUSA, ASU, and CPI have managed to bring anti-imperialist ideas into the mainstream via their collaboration with non-leftist anti-NATO entities, like the Libertarian Party, the left sectarians have portrayed this coalition as an opportunistic one. If it's opportunistic, why have its members all willingly put themselves at far greater risk of being targeted by the corporate media and the state than they would be if they had to work alone? Joining up with one another is how they've become a substantial threat towards our ruling institutions. To reject this united front strategy is to compromise with the empire. The mentality of the red libs, in which one becomes willing to handicap their own ability to be counter-hegemonic for the sake of keeping favor within left circles, is the same mentality that lets the Social Democrats rationalize collaborating with the imperialists. The difference is that the Social Democrats have state power, and therefore are capable of directly contributing to the empire's crimes. The nominal Marxists who pander to liberal sensibilities out of the political expediency are who enable these social fascists. To gain victory for the working class, we have to construct an alternative to both of these elements of the imperialism-compatible left. Ligand to Z, thank you so much for your donation. I appreciate it. Sample text. Thanks, bud. So, profound. Eric says, every single time I hear Ukraine saying that Russia shells civilians, I always question. Last week they cried about Russia shelling a pizza place. Turns out there was a foreign merc in the restaurant. Yeah. Well, and one thing, I don't really tend, and I've said this several times, I don't tend to really believe anything that anybody says, including the Russians, right? Including the Russians, because it's in everybody's interests to lie, right? And moreover, given the game that's being played, everybody should lie, right? Like the game of war involves deception, right? And all sides have a vested interest to lie. All sides have a vested interest to point at the other side and create narratives that will whip up their own base, right? Such is the nature of war. And so anytime I hear anybody saying that, oh, well, the Russians did, or, oh, even the Ukrainians did, or, oh, I'm kind of like, did they? Like, did they, though? Did they? Right? We go back to the early days of the war, how there was the ghost of Kiev, which was apparently a plane that in a single day shot down more planes than fighters did during all of World War II. Like, and we're all supposed to just kind of go along with that and buy into it. Perhaps not. Perhaps not. That I tend to believe action. I tend to believe my eyes and what I see is more or less the only thing that you can trust is action in war, because everybody is lying all the time, and moreover they should lie, because that's the nature of war. You want to deceive your opponent into doing one thing so that you can do another. and so you can't really stake your claim on what people say. You have to stake your claim on what happens and what people do. Ligon Disease said a while ago Caleb Maupin was the only thing resembling a socialist who showed up to protest Tsai Ing-wen's visit to New York alongside Chinese protesters. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about Maupin, I have to say. Like, first of all, I find it troubling what kind of came out about him. The sort of harrowing story of his abuse of a woman, right? Like it's pretty difficult for me to want to throw my chips in with someone who has done something like that. And then also there is the aspect of like his sort of his desire to sort of rehabilitate Americanism, right? His desire to rehabilitate American patriotism as something that has value. Like, my opinion is more or less that America and Americanism needs to be put in the dustbin of history. That people like Lincoln and Washington and Jefferson and all the rest of these guys, they were not good men. They were not good people. That Lincoln was not a holder of the he did not he was not the one who was pushing to free the slaves. He was brought to it. And his actions against the First Nations people, the massacres that he committed against First Nations people and First Nation population. So I tend to find that that's a bit childish, frankly. Like, no. Like, no. That a proper left in America is going to respect and understand that we have gone through a period of slave ownership. And that's what that is. That people like Lincoln, Washington, and the rest are slave owners, slaveholders. That's who they are. Bread Cultist writes, they're reviving World War II era myths about Russians using human wave tactics and being given only one rifle for 2 men. Yeah, what a ridiculous. Like, I love the whole quote unquote human wave tactic, right? Because what was actually happening is that the Germans had developed a strategy called the Blitzkrieg, right? And that the Blitzkrieg was designed to break lines. That was the whole point of it, and not just break lines to be able to fight on a singular battlefield, but to break lines in order to send thousands and thousands of machines and troops towards a target. This is what the Germans did to the French. That they blitzkrieged the French so that they broke through the front line of the French defenses, and instead of staying and fighting those defenses, they just blew past them and then ended up in Paris. And so the Russians knew this, and so they came up with the encirclement strategy, right? But at what cost? Well, it completely worked, because what the encirclement strategy did is it prevented the Blitzkrieg from forming. And it prevented the Germans from being able to perform a blitzkrieg tactic against the Russians, and so this looks like a quote unquote human wave. But what's more a human wave tactic than a blitzkrieg? Like a blitzkrieg is literally a human wave. Like, it's like literally what it is. It's just the pro-Nazi West is doing everything it can to convince people that the Russians were not acting rationally. And then on top of that, you have the idea of one rifle for two men. Well, so what that actually is, right, is that you have one gunner and one support. That's what you actually have, right? Like you've got one guy whose job is to point and shoot the rifle, and another guy whose job is to carry all the ammunition, carry the medicine, and also to be able to drag that guy out, right? Westerners don't really believe in that idea. Once a soldier dies, he dies, and they leave him there, right? That's not really what the Russians believe in. That if a man goes down, they try to get him out, right? They try to get him support. And so what the Westerners are seeing is two men, one rifle. But what the Russians are seeing is two men, one rifle, one support. So let's put this in League of Legends terms, right? It's your ADC support system, right? Pretty basic. Westerners don't believe in that. It's every man for themselves. If you get shot, get fucked. Every man's a gunner. There's no such thing as support, right? It's tough shit. Mr. Moon says, human nature for most of our existence, we've been simple communists, a la hunter-gatherers. Tribes weren't made up of profit-seeking individualists. Yeah. Tinker writes, that garbage sniffer Douglas McGregor keeps saying that Soviets defeated Nazi Germany because they gave them Lend-Lease. Yeah, losers will believe anything. Like, it's as simple as that. Like, you'll just believe anything if you're a dumb loser. Like the thing that's really going on in our society is like so many people believe that there is a 2,000-year-old Middle Eastern Jewish wizard, zombie wizard no less, that's going to come back at any moment to protect white Americans, and if you believe something like that, then you'll believe anything, right? Like, if you're that big a sucker, then you'll believe literally anything you're told. And so somebody stands up and says, yes, the Soviets defeated Nazi Germany not because of their superior economy and superior military tactics, but because there was a Lend-Lease. Shut up. It's so stupid. Like, it's the most dim-witted thing a person can believe. But if you believe a 2,000-year-old Middle Eastern Jewish zombie wizard is going to come back at any moment to protect white Americans, then you'll believe anything. Yeah. 84% of the Lend-Leases came after when the tide of war had already turned on all fronts. Yeah. Funny thing about these American reformers, why is it a step too far to assume that we can simply work to become new people? Why do we have to preserve the red, white, and blue? Yep. Like it's a form of patriotism, right? Like it's a desire to believe that there is something good, that has existed in our past, right? Yeah, the Soviets would have still won without Lend-Lease. He's also a revisionist that said we should have never joined World War II. Well, see, that's funny because, like, it's fine to say that we should have never joined World War II. Like, that's a fine thing to say, but it misunderstands the Empire's position, right? That what would that have looked like? If America had not have joined World War II, then the Soviets would have taken Europe. That they wouldn't have stopped at Germany, that they would have rolled through France, and they would have rolled through Spain, and they would have rolled through Portugal, they would have gone right to the coast. They would have taken all of Europe. And they would have essentially made, they would have essentially installed communism across Europe. The pro-fascist capitalist system can't have that, right? That the reason why the Americans joined the war ultimately is because during the war they were profiting from selling to both sides, and it became obvious that if the Soviets were to take Europe, then all of Europe would be communist, which is a major, major loss for the empire. And so they had to join the war, if only to keep the Soviets from turning all of Europe communist. And it completely worked. So it was necessary for America, being the pro-fascist society that it is, to maintain systems of fascism. And the only way they could have done that is by joining the war effort and meeting the Soviets at Berlin, and preventing the Soviets from continuing forward. And we can see that all of this is absolutely the truth, given what's happened after World War II, right? The erection of NATO, the rehabilitation of the Nazis, Operation Paperclip, the infusion of Nazis into NATO. That Germany is being still a fairly pro-fascist nation becomes part of NATO with the impetus to destroy the Soviet Union. That's their casus belli. That's their reason for existing, is to dismantle the Soviet Union, right? And from the Soviet perspective and from the Russian perspective, it's very difficult to look at Germany being allowed into this quote-unquote defensive alliance with NATO and think anything other than, oh, this is like pro-fascist, like Nazism version 2. And that's more or less what we're getting now, right? As Europe turns fascist and as NATO becomes more explicitly fascist, which, I mean, I would argue that I think it can be argued to a certain degree that the bombing of Yugoslavia there's complexity to it. I think that it's not unreasonable to think that there's a more complex narrative there. But the destruction of Libya is the end of NATO's smokescreen. That if you are actually going to stand in front of me and say that NATO is an anti-fascist organization or is not fascist after the destruction of Libya, I think you're out to lunch. Like, I don't think that you're a credible thinker anymore. I think that you can be roundly ignored because if you are going to look at the destruction of Libya as anything other than an explicitly fascist action against a strong, powerful socialist nation, then I think you're nuts. Like, I think you're just a Looney Tunes. Yeah, sniper and spotter. That's another way of thinking about it, right? Yeah, how dare the Soviets have people watch each other's back, right? Tinker writes, snowflakes were going crazy because Netflix portrayed Cleopatra as a black woman. Yeah. I keep telling them Jesus Christ was not white. Like, get over it. Yeah. Like, Americans don't care. All of the heroes of the past were white, don't you know? Soon Martin Luther King will be white. Grinning says Germany invaded Russia through Ukraine and the West wonders why Putin freaks out when NATO takes military position on Russia's front door. Yeah, mind-boggling. Yeah. Well, if you're a liberal, it is. And that Middle Eastern Jewish zombie wizard suspiciously looked like a white European, exactly. But there is something good in the people here. But why we think it has to be American is beyond me. This American patriotism is the most alien shit in my view. It's actually aesthetically creepy. I think people want to have a historical narrative, right? People want a historical narrative, and they want to see that that they are part of something else, right? That this, I think, is intrinsically true in humanity, is that humans want to feel as though they are part of a larger system, and they want to believe that that larger system is good, right? These are the intrinsic desires, right? Like down to being a child. When you are a child, you want to believe that your parents are good. You want that. And everybody has a moment where there's a realization moment or a waking up moment to your parents not being perfect. And the natural reaction to that is rejection. That kids really denigrate and shit on their parents. They blame their parents. There's a lot of that happens. And I think that's part of growing up. A part of growing up is recognizing that your parents are not infallible, that and that your parents may be not good, that your parents have deep flaws, but then also forgiving them for those flaws, because they are also trapped in this system as you are trapped in this system. And to expect perfection from them is childish. And I think that there are a lot of people who take this principle, this idea, and lay it onto their society. That they want to believe that their society is good. They want to believe that their society is powerful and infallible, and they want to believe this. And it's childish, is what it is. Like, and I don't mean childish as an insult. I mean it's literally something that a child would think, and that part of growing up is to be rid of this childish notion that simply because you were born in a place, then that makes it good. Because there is something narcissistic about it. This sort of well, my parents must be perfect and good because I'm perfect and good. My society must be perfect and good because I'm perfect and good. And if my society is not perfect and good, and if my parents are not perfect and good, and these are the things that generated me, then I am not perfect and good. And that can't be the case. That can't be the case. And so and so it's very important for the power structure to keep us infantile, right? That our culture is very infantile, and we are made infantile. And the boomer generation infantilizes us. And that's intentional. That's done on purpose, so that we will remain as children. Because as long as we remain as children, we will not question the power structure. We will not question our parents. We won't question our institutions. We won't question any of this, so long as we remain infatuated with the things that children are infatuated by. And as because if we were to begin the process of being adults and acting as adults, we would expect to have adult conversations. We would expect to make plans, to formulate ideas, to move forward as adults together. But that's not the nature of the relationship. That the nature of the relationship right now is this infantilization of our society and of our people. That we're treated as children, and many of us are happy to be treated that way. Many of us are happy to just remain infantile in the belief that we are good and what we do is good. And we say this is how things are, and it's true because we say so. It's completely infantile. But unfortunately, that's like a majority position at this stage in the game. And I think that a lot of that patriotism and looking to the past as a patriot comes from this infantilization. That George Washington and these guys, the founding fathers, they must be good, right? It just has to be the case that they must be good, and if they're not, then what is this place? Like what is it that we're doing here? What is America? What is this place? Right? And eventually the myths and eventually all of this sort of stuff does fall apart, right? And one of the things that I think about all of the time, that is always on the back burner in my mind, is that the boomer generation will die. And nothing can prevent that from happening. That we are going to live in a world where the oldest people in it are millennials. That is going to happen as a guarantee, as a promise from the universe itself. And that the generations that are beneath the millennials will be these Gen Z kids, will be the Gen Alpha, I guess they're called now, which, what a terrible name to give a generation, Gen Alpha. I can't think of a worse thing to do to a group of people. But in any case, that's what it is. And that a lot of the myths and illusions and delusions that exist within the boomer generation are simply not going to persist. You can see that through every generational breakdown that exists. That a belief in Jesus Christ between the boomers and the millennials is sharply different. A belief in the reality of angels is sharply different. A belief in the reality of trickle-down economics. A belief in the Israel-Palestine conflict, issue by issue by issue, that there are sharp differences. The belief in climate change, the belief that something should be done about climate change. There are sharp differences between the boomer generation and the millennial generation. And the boomer generation is on board with the infantilization of they called us Gen X because they couldn't figure us out. I mean, I'm quite sympathetic to Gen X. Like, all Gen X could do is go along with it. That's all they could do. That even if they were to stand up and protest and rage and do all that kind of stuff, they were outnumbered. And it's just as simple as that. They were outnumbered. My hope is that as the boomer cohort begins to die off, Gen X will side with the millennial generation. And but I worry that Gen X has experienced such a huge and massive trauma as a cohort that they will just fall into a sense of nihilism, a sense of malaise, which is more or less what I see from the Gen X generation. And it manifests in a few different ways. You have the people who are proud of their subjugation, right? Who are happy, who have learned to love their ownership, right? Because they had no other alternative. You have that kind of crew. And then you just have the people who are just shrugging and saying, you can't change it, right? You can't change it. And it makes sense that at the end of the boomer life cycle, they're acting in the most demented way possible, right? It makes sense that at the end of the life of boomers, as the generations that are coming up behind them are rejecting basically everything that boomers believed, that they would react in a hysterical and a high hysteria way. It makes sense that boomers would do this, right? Because they see that we are rejecting them, right? Okay, boomer. Okay, boomer was a big one, if you ask me. That okay, boomer really put the nail in the coffin, I think, for a lot of these boomers. That it put them in a place that boomers, I think, were acting from a place of power for a long time. But now I think they have pivoted and now they're acting from a place of vengeance, because they see that the generations that are coming up are rejecting them, okay, boomer, and are not interested in listening to what they have to say any longer, and are defying their power and are denigrating their power and mocking their power. And so the boomers have turned to vengeance and are saying, oh, if that's what you're going to do, then fuck you. I don't care what you say. I am going to be against you simply because. And I'm not going to I'm not going to leave this plane of reality without exerting my power over you. And I'm not going to capitulate even one drop of that power. Even one drop of that power. You're going to have to tear that power from my cold, dead hands, because I did it my way. Right? Like, take some time and listen to the popular culture of the boomer generation. Take some time and listen to what these guys say about themselves and what they felt was popular. And it's very difficult to see anything other than a self-inflated, narcissistic group of power-hungry psychopaths. Like, they're not interested in improving the world around them. They're interested in themselves. Yeah, I think my generation is so cynical they'll destroy anything out of spite. We're already seeing that. I think that that's already happening, right? Like Donald Trump is that. That is exactly what Donald Trump is. That the energy and the spirit that Donald Trump carried with him when he won that election, and the energy that he carries with it now is as a destroyer. He is a vessel of vengeance. That's what he is. He's not there to he espouses a message of power, make America great again, right? But really he's there to put a thumb in the eye of the power structure. He is an avatar of vengeance. And I mean, you think about his ascension through the Republican Party, that like it's actually very startling that he defeated Jeb Bush. Really, that's very startling. That's somewhat unprecedented. That Jeb Bush, by any principle of power, should have become the nominee. He should have absolutely become the nominee. He was a familiar name. He was the brother of a former president who he himself was also the son of a former president. That populations rather like family dynasties. As much as people profess how their skepticism towards it, populations like them, right? That's why we like things like queens. It's why we like them. Like it's just the truth. We like family dynasties. And Jeb Bush was handily defeated. It wasn't close at all. Jeb Bush didn't poll higher than 5%. Like, that's startling. That is a startling indictment of the Bush legacy and the end of the Bush legacy and the ascension of Trump was essentially Americans throwing a Molotov cocktail into the political apparatus and just saying, deal with this. This is what we think of you. Be done away with this concept of statesmanship. Be done away with this your platitudes and pleasantries. Be done away with this absurd notion that you people have any ethical positioning whatsoever. In many ways, Trump is a repudiation of the Obama administration. That Obama is a statesman, and he speaks so well, and his speeches are so good, and he completely betrays the population. And so Donald Trump, with his grab her by the pussy talk, and all that's just locker talk, and all of this kind of stuff, is a repudiation of all of that. A way for the nation to tell its political apparatus, this is what we actually think of you. That you're not better than this. That this is who you are. And we know it. And we know it. And of course, the election of Donald Trump opened up the door and empowered a lot of lunatics. A lot of Marjorie Taylor Greenes, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz. Just outright power-hungry lunatics. But that always existed in the Republican Party. They've just gotten a lot more vocal about it. And they know how to galvanize their base that way. And then the Joe Biden election is an attempt to return to normalcy, right? That everybody just wants things to be normal again. I just want things to be normal again. You know, let's just get like Sleepy Joe in there, and Sleepy Joe will start a war in Ukraine. Like... And I suspect that the backlash against Joe Biden will be even worse. Because Joe Biden was literally elected while people were saying we'll push him to the left and he'll do things for the left. I'm coming in as the next FDR. You remember? We're gonna come in here and we're gonna change things and we're gonna make things better. What did Joe Biden do? What did Joe Biden get done? Looked like a whole bunch of fuck all to me. Looks like a whole bunch of fuck all to me. Yeah, battered wife behavior. Gen X has 51 million and such still alive. Boomers are still in charge. Well, the major problem isn't just the numbers, because by the numbers, Gen X and the millennials and Gen Z should be able to get together and overwhelm the boomers. The issue is that the boomers have all the money, right? That the system runs on money, and the people who have the money are boomers. A big reason why our media is so terrible right now is that the only people who are permitted to tell stories at the moment are boomers, right? So people who back in the 90s and back in the 80s were telling stories, right? And they were telling stories to themselves. They were telling stories to boomers. So you had boomers telling stories to boomers, and you ended up with some really good stuff. But instead of passing the baton to the next generation, allowing millennials, even Gen X, and Gen Z to start telling stories and to start getting involved in that, boomers aren't willing to do that. That the only stories that boomers are willing to tell are boomer stories, and with boomer characters. And so what you end up with, I refer to the most obvious one in my view is Tim Burton's Wednesday, right? Just a tired boomer trying to appeal to a younger generation and telling a really shitty story, frankly. And like, you can like Wednesday all you like, but it's a shitty story that misses the mark completely. And you see this with like the new Indiana Jones movie, right? It's just like a boomer story told by boomers to try to appeal to millennials, and it sucks because these boomers have become completely detached from reality. Or if you want a really good case in point for how detached our storytelling has become, you just need to take a look at The Simpsons, right? That The Simpsons are currently incoherent. They don't make any sense at all. That shows like Family Guy are like this as well. That the configuration of the family doesn't make any sense. It's illogical from the start. And so these shows devolve into a complete Dadaism, an absurdism, just cutaways, stupid things happening, no logic to them whatsoever, and they're supposed to be funny because they are random, right? That if your job is to elicit laughter, well, a way to do that is just to delve into the absurd. But yeah, I have seen this meme that's been going around, the Simpsons meme going around. A goof like Homer could afford a home, raise a family at a union job. Absolutely. And there was a union episode, if you remember, right? A very powerful episode in retrospect of The Simpsons, where they went on strike and won against their boss, right? Something that you would never see on television today. And but Homer Simpson as a figure is completely incoherent in today's society. A single wage earner working at a pretty lackadaisical job. Like he famously like has his feet up on the table and is like sleeping at his job. It's widely understood that he's pretty incompetent at it, but he works that job, has a house, a wife that doesn't work, and 3 kids. And a car, and goes on vacation. Like, and that was considered coherent. That was considered normal, right? Or at least attainable. That if you weren't living that life at that time, you knew people who did. Well, now the Simpsons are incoherent. And so the stories have become incoherent. And the stories have just become random nonsense. That like Homer goes to the moon. And you just have like absolute absurd nonsense and stupid cutaways that refer to nothing. And The Simpsons, I think, are attempting to become somewhat socially relevant again by having like Robert Reich on their show, all that kind of stuff. But the issue with the show is that the family themselves are incoherent, and until they're willing to actually infuse coherence into the family dynamic itself, i.e., Marge should get a job, they should lose their house, they should be living in a shitty apartment, they should have a relationship with a landlord. Lisa and Bart should probably get jobs themselves. There should be a good amount of failure. There should be a good amount of tragedy that exists. That Springfield itself should become darker, dingier, right? People should not have these union jobs. There shouldn't be. There should be a sense of economic despair that exists in the society any longer. And but the reality is that the show is still run by boomers trying to relate to people that they can't relate to, that they can't relate to the millennial generation because they refuse to. They simply refuse to. That they don't care what millennials have to say. They don't, just like they didn't care what Gen X rather had to say. That millennials have become incomprehensible because the life that the millennials have led is sharply different from the life of the boomers. And the boomers keep talking about how I got everything through my hard work, while completely ignoring the social systems that they benefited from and then dismantled. Yeah. And they could at least talk to Ned Flanders, a Christian right-winger, unlike today. Well, and Ned Flanders, a Christian right-winger, wasn't explicitly a crazed, violent lunatic, right? That there was sort of this general sense that Ned Flanders had some kooky views, but he was still a good man, right? But he's not a good man. Like today's Ned Flanders would not be a good man. Today's Ned Flanders would be Matt Walsh. SVBG, good to see you, bud. Look at the new Pixar films. Disney nearly refuses to put any money into advertisement because of how different the stories are. I mean, to pretend as though Disney is anything other than the propaganda wing of the CIA, like the entertainment propaganda wing of the CIA at this point, I think is baffling. Like, the entire point of Disney at this point is to bombard and overwhelm the culture with diversity culture issues. That's the whole point, is to, like, you have to remember that the Occupy movement happened not that long ago. That the Occupy movement was not that, it wasn't a distant memory. And the Occupy movement was an explicitly class-based movement. The whole, we are the 99%. The entire concept of the 1% comes out of that movement. And a rational society would have responded to it rationally, would have created jobs programs, would have created some kind of incentive, would have done something, right? Even in the Roman Empire, when there was a servile war, the Roman Empire did reforms, right? These people literally crucifying people publicly still responded to a slave revolt. Not America. Not America. And and so the power structure understands. It understands that it can't remain silent and that it can't actually have a class-based conversation because it knows it has no credibility in that regard. It knows it can't win that conversation. And so instead what it does is it takes Disney and it has them just load the society with culture war issues. And it embarks on a culture war. And it knows that it's inflaming a far right by doing that. It knows that it's enacting a culture war. It knows it's doing that because it knows that controversy sells tickets, so it's a good way to make money. But it's a good way to make money from right wingers who want to come see it to hate it, and from left wingers who want to come see it to show support. And as long as the culture is talking about these culture war issues, these diversity culture issues, then they're never going to talk about class issues. And that's the whole goal of Pixar and Disney and all of these places, that they're not actually interested in like, where's the Disney show that's about unionists? Where's the Disney movie that's about a guy fighting against a union? Right? The closest we've ever come is something like A Bug's Life, right? Which happened in the 90s or early 2000s. We will never see that again. That will never happen again, because we cannot have, the power structure cannot have explicit anti-capitalist sentiment. It cannot have it. It cannot permit it. And that's what Disney is doing, and that's who Disney is now, which I'm actually quite bummed by, because when I was growing up, Disney was actually an artistic, it was actually attempting to produce art, right? There was actual artistry that existed within Disney. And instead now it's just ideological propaganda, sacrificing everything to do it. Like all credibility, all storytelling capability. Like Disney is no longer capable of telling good stories, and they're sacrificing everything. Content, yes. The ongoing conversation we're having, Content. That is weird. What is the standard for a good show that is diverse? Because I find it strange that diverse representation is responsible for not being seen. So now we get into the culture, the diverse. How do you have diversity? How do you talk about diversity? And to me, I think the way that you do it is honestly, that you actually do have a conversation about the disparities that exist within the culture. You actually talk about the issue of racism. You actually talk about the issue of diversity. That instead of simply shoehorning it in the way that it's done, right? Like, so take like the Beauty and the Beast remake. Just LeFou happens to be gay, right? LeFou happens to be gay. Do we owe it to the gamers to have seat female characters 100% of the time? To me, I think it's like, it's the transparency of it at this stage. Yeah, merely existing as woke. How do you win that over? Oh yeah, don't get me wrong, Cotton. Like, the far right has lost its mind. You know my point on this. Like, the fact that they're reacting the way that they are to trans people and to the trans movement with it is hysteria. Like, it's hysteria. Like, when Dave Chappelle did his specials, right? At first, I was somewhat on board with, talking about trans people, asking these questions, because I didn't anticipate the hysteria that existed within the far right, and the lengths that they were pretty clearly willing to go in order to have this completely outsized response, right? The trans population represents less than 1% of the population, and yet we have like legislators, governors, who are passing legislation in order to attack them, while ignoring major, massive issues that obviously affect huge sections of the population, including the right. And so it's a hysteria. It's a religious fervor is what it is. Not much different than something like the Salem witch trials. Just a religious fervor that has taken over and empowered zealots.
And I don't think there is a different way to discuss it. That they're not rational. They're clearly not actually interested in what's going on. And if they are interested in what's going on, their interest is an obsession. It's an obsession. Yeah, Satan is in Dungeons and Dragons style crap. Yeah, it's that kind of a level of just hysteria. But at least, and SVBG, I mean, like that's a fine analogy. But can you imagine if the far right started to ban Dungeons and Dragons and started to treat people who, oh, he has a 20-sided dice, and so we need to take him away from his kids, take him away from his family, right? Like this is where we're at with this trans issue, and it's insane. It's obsessive, it's manic, it's hysteria based, and it is. I can respect and understand. Look, I'll throw the right a little bit of a bone here, okay? I can respect and understand there being a curiosity, and obviously they're curious, right? It's red states that have high levels of trans porn, right? If you look at Google and the searches that happen there, it's the right wing that's searching up trans porn more than anybody else, right? Because they're curious, because they're like, what is this? How does this exist? What are you talking about? I don't know what this is. I'm confused by it. I want to know more. I want to learn about it, right? But they're doing what they always do. Hey, Leon, how you doing, bud? How they're doing what they always do, which is they're projecting their own insecurities and fears onto a group of people, right? Like the whole groomer phenomenon, right? Is so obviously a projection, like it's so obviously a projection, and and I can even go so far that to say that I completely understand why someone would be a bigot about it. Like if people can be bigots towards people because they have a different skin color, then of course they're going to be bigots along these lines. Like all of that makes a type of sense. I'm not happy about it, obviously, but it makes a type of sense. But what has happened is such an overwhelming, outsized response that it is worthy of our discussion. My theory, very simply, is that the existence of trans people threatens the masculinity of insecure white males. That's more or less what I see. That during the gay issue, insecure white males didn't want to ask themselves, am I gay? Because there's a lot of fear there, and you can't be afraid if you're a male. You got to be big and strong and powerful. You're not allowed to express emotion or have fear. But eventually the culture got to the point where men did ask themselves that question, recognized that it was an easy question to answer, right? And it is easy to answer, right? Are you attracted to men or are you not attracted to men? And some of them say yes, not a lot of them. And then some of them say no. And then the issue kind of became normalized, and the fervor died down because people asked the question genuinely and had it answered genuinely, and then came to realize that asking the question wasn't actually that scary. It wasn't that scary in the end of it all to say, am I gay? No. Well, am I gay? Well, I think maybe. Well, yeah, you know what? Yes, I am. And to stand up in a society that was opening up the door to a gay population and to find that community. And many people, I think, came to see the benefits of it, of including and this type of diversity. Like, oh, people stopped losing their jobs over it. People stopped experiencing personal tragedies over it. You didn't have to watch that happen in your life anymore. This whole ethos of it's not okay to be gay went away. And suddenly it's just, you get to live your life, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's fine. And it was all based on, in my opinion, on the fact that straight white men were afraid of their own sexuality. And at the same time, I see that exact same situation happening in the trans conversation, except it's much worse. Because asking the question, am I gay? Yes, no, is far easier than asking the question, what is a man? What does it mean to be a man? The coward and fascist Matt Walsh asks, what is a woman? Because he's too cowardly to actually ask the question, what is a man? Right? He needs to go after women. Because he's not only a bigot against trans people, right, and gay people, but also women, right? What does strength actually look like? Tinker, I will answer your question, but that's going on another tangent. The difficult question that the existence of trans people posits to the most fragile people in the society, which are straight white Christian men, is what is a man? What does it mean to be a man? That our societal understanding, that trans people demand and insist that there is such a thing as a social construct of a man, that masculinity, as we understand it, as the social construct understands it, doesn't actually exist. That we have simply created a picture of what we expect a man to look like. And if you're a far-right conservative who has defined your identity on that picture, you don't want to hear that doesn't exist. You don't want to hear that the image that you've based your entire identity on is false. You're far too fragile for that. That's why they entrench themselves in magical books. That's why they entrench themselves in what their daddy said. Because they don't have the fortitude or wherewithal to actually entrench themselves in something real and something tangible. To put their feet on the ground and stand up like a person. Not a man, but a person. And to just recognize that there's no value really in the idea of masculinity. There's no value truly in the idea of being a man, right? You just happen to be a man. I hate to break it to you. That you might like the idea of the Arnold Schwarzenegger, He-Man, big, strong, tough, protectorate male and all of that kind of stuff. But all of that is just a happenstance. That the only thing that really makes you a quote-unquote man is that you have a dick. Is that you just happen to be born with a dick. That's all. That's it. And that what the bigots don't like about this is that it means that the distinction between them and a woman, who they despise, is actually not that different. That they just have an innie, you just have an outie. And that you're not that much different in the end of it all. Not really. Like, for every difference that you can find 100 similarities. And that we're all just people. Reacting to the shit that the world gives us. But the existence of a trans person forces them to confront that. And they can't. They can't confront it. Because they're too weak. They lack the intellectual and moral and spiritual capacity to confront the reality that they are subservient to a power that is much greater than themselves, which is the universe. And the existence of a trans person reminds them of their weakness and their frailty. And they can't handle it. They can't handle it. So it's a much more difficult problem. It's a much, much more difficult problem. It isn't as simple as being like, well, am I gay? No. It is, well, am I a big, strong, powerful man that's in control of my life? No. It's much more difficult. Tinker. But, John, do you see this maybe a distraction to actually confront and organize against capitalism? Why would a corporation have a trans in its Super Bowl commercials? Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I agree with that. Like what the corporate power structure is doing is and I've said it before, they're using this issue as a shield, as a way to be like, but look, we care, right? But it's a form of gaslighting, right? It's a form of gaslighting. It's just like how a psychopath operates, right? Look how much I care. Look, as long as you keep talking about this one issue, as long as you keep discussing this one issue that I care about, right? As long as you keep talking about this one issue and you don't talk about actual class issues, and if you do start talking about class issues, I can call you a bigot, right? If you start saying, oh, you don't actually care about trans people, you're just using them as a way to distract from the populace. Oh, that you're just being a bigot, right? So it's the perfect defense. It's the perfect defense, and it's exactly what a psychopath would do. Eric, have I watched the Matt Walsh documentary? No. I doubt I ever will, because my assumption is that it's just like, from the clips that I've seen of it, it's a series of bad faith arguments made by an intellectually dim Luddite, and who pretends as though the responses that come at him are irrational, when I think they're quite rational. I think it's quite rational for people to be skeptical of Matt Walsh when he starts to demonize like chemicals, right? Like, so hey, the chemicals that they use are also used for castration. It's like, so what? Like, what water is used in most compound chemicals. Like, does that mean that we shouldn't drink water? You dumb fucking dim-witted fascist. Like, I just don't think I want to waste my time with such a Looney Tunes loser. And like, going through it, like, if I went through that documentary and actually picked it apart, like, no one would care. The people who are on the side of Matt Walsh are fascist Nazis. They're not going to have their minds changed. Yeah, water has been used for waterboarding. Tinker says the most dangerous part is organized capital seems very attentive and deceptive. It's taking every angle to distract the populace from the failures of capital. Yep. Well, because they don't really want... Like, I think one of the things that's generally true is that the capitalists don't really want to turn to the fascists. That they really do want to be seen as good people. I think that's the truth. They want to be seen as good stewards, beneficial, when they're not. And they would prefer to commit to these systems of distraction and obfuscation than to ultimately do what they are going to have to do. And when they do it, they'll be very much with this sort of look what you made me do sort of attitude, right? When they finally let the fascists take over, when they finally let the fascists run the show, it will be done with this, like, look what you made me do kind of attitude, right? And I don't think that they want to do it, because as soon as they do it, even they will understand that they're the villains. Right? Even they will understand. Like, you don't go and crack people's heads open with batons and think you're a good person. Right? But they want their power. And of course, there'll be some of them who will take an attitude of look what you made me do. But there will also be large sections of them that'll be like, oh, look what we get to do. Right? So it'll be a moment that really separates the true psychopaths from, like, the liberals who are just kind of going along with it. But of course, both are reprehensible for their own reasons. But we will see, and there are examples of people who are like this. Like someone like Kevin O'Leary, I think, is just an outright psychopath. who revels in the poverty and despair of others. I think he's looking forward to watching people's heads get cracked open. So there are psychopaths in the conversation. But for the most part, I think we're looking at liberals who will sort of see the turn to fascism as mainly unfortunate. Mainly unfortunate. So I've been wanting to read this. I've been flicking back and forth from it. This comes from a sub that I follow called Canada Sub. It's a far-right sub, without a doubt. Lots of PPC people, lots of pro-capitalist people. Not a lot of members, right? Not a lot of members. It's just growing. One of the things, though, that gives it credibility, in my view, is that they won't ban people for their views. Like, the moderators of this subreddit know that I'm a communist. They know what my views are. I can post the reality of Canada's funding of Nazis and not be banned, right? And so this has attracted not just far-right people, but also far-left people to it. And so you end up with weird and interesting conversations. And then you end up with interesting expressions, such as this one. After going through the 5 stages of grief, I have decided to leave Ontario and Canada altogether. About 10 years ago, I went to my bank to inquire about a mortgage. The advisor informed me I simply do not make enough money, single income. I was as far as I could go on my career path, and without a partner, society is incredibly hostile towards single income earners. Thus began the denial phase. I was making more money than my father ever did, and he was able to buy a house and raise a family of 4. This shouldn't be happening. This, of course, gave way to anger. I became very angry. I was doing everything I was supposed to do, and I was falling behind. The company I worked for started to change leadership. Things got worse, and I eventually decided I needed a fresh start. So I started bargaining with myself. If I got a better paying job, I will get back on track. I got a better paying job, but the company was actually worse in terms of culture and, dare I say, ethics. I kept up the job search and hopped around 2 more jobs until I landed where I am now. Next came a hard depression. The new job was working for the federal government. I had been told for years, get a job and you'll be set for life. But at what cost? I was provided with no training. There are no instructions or SOPs. Now that I have seen behind the veil, I understand why our government services and infrastructure are crumbling. As inflation soared, so too did my depression. Is this it? Is this the rest of my life? Working this horrible office job, I was having suicidal thoughts daily. I dipped my toes into therapy. CBT is a joke, by the way. I eventually found a therapist who helped frame and contextualize my thoughts into taking action. Looking back now, a therapist is just a rational, non-biased sounding board that drops breadcrumbs for you to follow until you reach your epiphany. And finally, acceptance. I had to accept the fact that I will never retire, never own my own home, never be happy working these terrible jobs surrounded by terrible people. So what was the answer? What do I value? I needed new goals because the ones I had before were never going to happen in Canada. I had to wake up and accept the fact that Canada is not the same Canada I grew up in. The voice in the back of my head that had always been there was now loud and clear. Leave. I forgot. I can leave. Anytime I want. I have nothing tying me down here in Canada. I have no debts. I've never been in debt. I have a massive savings account. All I have are my superficial possessions. And what true happiness have they brought me? None. I have an aunt and an uncle who bought a vacation home in Central America, and they've graciously agreed to let me live there rent-free for a while. Over the past few months, I've been selling all of my material possessions and growing my bank account even more. I've stopped participating in the economy. I don't buy anything beyond basic necessities and food. I have no desire for any of it. Walmart, IKEA, cities, Starbucks, it all disgusts me to my core now. This is not how human beings are supposed to live. We all go along with it as if it were normal. So I'm out. I'm done. I'm done with Canada. I'm done with the late-stage capitalism. I'm done with the apathetic voters who do nothing but complain and won't lift a finger to try and change things. Goodbye, Canada, and good riddance. I'll watch your implosion from the beach, and I strongly encourage anyone else with the means to do so. Get out of Canada. I've always felt that it is important. One of the real important things for this channel to do is to highlight regular citizens. Something that our news media won't do. Something that our newspaper won't do. And so when I see something like this, I feel drawn to reading it, and I'm glad that I did. Yeah, thanks for reading that. I like hearing personal experiences. They feel more real than theory. Yeah, that's right. They are more real than theory. This is the lived experience of a real Canadian who and his experience is, or her experience, seems understandable, normal. We relate to it. And an articulation like this, I think, is important for us to do, so that we understand that you are not alone. You are not alone. You are not isolated. That there are people out there who are experiencing the world as you are experiencing it, who see the world as you see it. That the boomer gaslighting and the corporate gaslighting that we are all experiencing is exactly that. It is gaslighting. And that they can't keep away the true reality of what it is to live in this world. And they won't be able to keep the game up for much longer. Because eventually they die. Eventually they die. And stories like this one will become commonly understood. And after this fascist period, we will tell these stories. We will tell these stories. Command Genius, good to see you. This needs to be captioned with the book cover of Capital. Yeah. This man is very lucky to have family in Central America. He's very lucky to be able to do what he's doing. You know, Adam, comments being blocked. Let's take a look, bud. What channel, my man? I don't know what channel you're in. Yeah, I don't understand why YouTube blocks things. What the rationale behind that is. My largest complaint with these social media systems, I don't mind that they block stuff, and I don't mind that they ban. I think that that's fine. But what I find to be reprehensible about it is that they don't show you why you're being banned. They just ban you. They give a general banal sort of reason, but like there's a sound bite, there's a clip, and they won't show it to you. I think that that's reprehensible. I think that's what makes it fascistic. That gives it a Kafka-esque quality. That it's faceless and the rationale is actually unbeknownst to you. So if they wanted to legitimize the process, they should show you the clip. You should have access to the clip so that you can see it. But the reason why they won't do that is because they know that many of these bans are illegitimate. They know that many of these bans are illegitimate, and they know exactly what will happen. That people will take those clips and show it to people, and people will see that it's an illegitimate system. So that's why they don't do it. Regarding the Matt Walsh, I've not seen it, just watched Why Is There So Much Right-Wing Media by Second Thought. Check it out to see who backs him and others. And yeah, not just cash. Yeah, I mean, that's another side of it, of course. Like, Matt Walsh has backing. Like, all these far-right grifters have, like, Adolf Hitler had backing, right? But we don't tend to talk about that. Ooh. All right, guys. I feel I've reached the end of this one a little bit early, but that's okay. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.